There are moments in life when the heart quietly whispers for refuge, guidance, and strength. And in those moments, Allah places before us doors of protection that we often overlook. Surah Al-Kahf is one of those divine doors, a weekly invitation to awaken the soul, illuminate the mind, and shield the heart from the storms of this dunya. Every Friday, when the world rushes in with noise and chaos, Surah Al-Kahf becomes a sanctuary where we remember that our story, no matter how complicated, is never beyond the knowledge or mercy of Allah. Its verses remind us that trials are not punishments but pathways, that darkness is not a dead end but a test, that miracles unfold in the quiet trust we place in our Lord. When you read Surah Al-Kahf, you are not just reciting words, you are stepping into a reminder that Allah protects you from deen, destroying illusion, that He strengthens you against the Dajjal's deception, and that He stabilizes your heart against the temptations that try to pull you off the path. Reading it every Friday is not a ritual, it is a renewal. It is a recalibration of the soul back to the one who writes your destiny, carries your burdens, and lights your path with His infinite wisdom. Surah Al-Kahf whispers to you, trust the one who never leaves you, and walk with the light He sends every week to guide you through the chaos of life. Surah Al-Kahf offers divine light that guides the believer through the darkness of trials and confusion. It is not just a chapter to be recited, it is a lantern for the soul, a reminder that no matter how overwhelming life becomes, Allah has already placed guidance within reach. The world around us is filled with uncertainty, moments when we feel lost, moments when our hearts tremble, moments when the path in front of us seems blurred by pain, doubt, or fear. In these very moments, Surah Al-Kahf becomes a spiritual compass, pointing us back to the one who never leaves us and never burdens a heart beyond what it can carry. When a person steps into the recitation of this surah, it is like stepping into a world where the struggles of humanity, the silent battles of the heart, and the storms of faith are acknowledged with compassionate divine wisdom. Each story in Surah Al-Kahf carries layers of meaning meant to pierce through confusion and replace it with clarity. The story of the people of the cave reminds us that faith thrives when we choose Allah over comfort, and that escape from the pressures of the world sometimes means retreating into the sanctuary of His remembrance. It teaches that when Allah protects you, no oppression, no loneliness, and no fear can touch you. Even as the world's you, the heart anchored in Allah remains firm. Then comes the story of the man with the 2 gardens, an illustration of how easily the human heart can be deceived by material success. Wealth, status, and worldly comfort can bring a false sense of security, blinding a person from the reality that everything they have is a toost. Surah Al-Kahf pulls back this veil, reminding us that without gratitude, humility, and reliance on Allah, even the most beautiful gardens can wither. This is the light. It gives us a reminder that true richness is not in what the hands hold, but in what the heart submits to. The encounter of Musa a.s. with Khidr is perhaps one of the most profound lessons in navigating confusion. How many times do we question Allah's plan when things don't go our way? How often do we look at our broken expectations and feel abandoned or unfairly tested? This surah teaches us that divine wisdom often lies hidden beneath the surface, beyond the limits of our understanding. What appears as a setback may be protection. What seems like loss may be preparation. What feels like unanswered prayers may be Allah redirecting us to something far better. Surah Al-Kahf teaches that the heart finds peace not by understanding everything, but by trusting that Allah understands everything. And then, the story of Dhul Qarnayn shows us strength rooted not in ego, but in righteousness. His power did not blind him to his responsibility. He used what Allah gave him not to dominate, but to serve, to build, and to protect. This is another light, the surah, a reminder that success is not in power itself, but in the humility with which it is used. When Allah grants a person ability, influence, or authority, it becomes a trust to uplift others, not a privilege to elevate oneself. When these stories come together, Surah Al-Kahf becomes more than scripture. It becomes a shelter. Its light does not remove the storms of life, but it gives the believer a way to walk through them with dignity, patience, and hope. It teaches that confusion is not a sign of weakness, it is a place where faith grows. Darkness is not a punishment, it is a moment where the light of guidance shines burdens. Allah did not leave you to navigate this world alone. He gave you reminders, signs, and stories that heal your heart and bring you back to Him. To read Surah Al-Kahf is to realign your soul with truth in a world full of illusion. It is to remember that even when life feels heavy, Allah's guidance is near. And it is to trust that no matter how dark the night becomes, His light is always enough to lead through. It protects the heart from the deceptions of Dajjal by strengthening clarity, faith, and discernment. In a world where illusions are constantly presented as truth, where falsehood dresses itself in appealing form, and where the heart can easily be swayed by what it sees, Surah Al-Kahf becomes a shield, quiet, powerful, and deeply transformative. The deception of Dajjal is not only a future event, it is also a reflection of the everyday deceptions we face, the temptation of shortcuts, the illusion of worldly success, the seduction of desires, and the subtle pull of everything that distances us from Allah. Surah Al-Kahf teaches the believer how to recognize truth even when lies look convincing, and how to stay grounded even when the world tries to shake the foundation of faith. When a person recites and reflects upon this surah, the heart begins to see with a different kind of vision, not the vision of the eyes, but the vision of the soul. This inner clarity is what protects a believer from the greatest trials of the end times. The Dajjal's deception is rooted in manipulating realities, making the temporary seem eternal, making the forbidden appear harmless, and making the path of Allah look difficult, while the path of falsehood looks easy. But Surah Al-Kahf trains the heart to look beyond surface, level appearances, and to connect with deeper truth. Through its stories, it cultivates the ability to question what the world presents, to reflect before accepting, and to align every decision with the light of divine guidance, rather than the glitter of momentary attraction. This surah teaches faith not through abstract concepts, but through lived lessons. The people of the cave were confronted with a society drowning in falsehood, pressured by a culture that demanded conformity. Yet they held onto truth with unwavering certainty. Their escape into the cave symbolizes the retreat of the believer into Allah's protection when the world becomes too heavy with deception. Their story reminds the heart that faith is not merely belief. It is courage, it is conviction, and it is the willingness to choose Allah even when the world pulls you in every other direction. This kind of faith is the exact protection one needs against Dajjal's influence, the strength to say no when falsehood is loud, and the trust to say yes to Allah even when His plan is unseen. The story of the two garden owners reveals another subtle deception, the illusion of worldly prosperity. Dajjal's trial is often described as a trial of material delusion, where abundance becomes a trap and miracles become a tool. This surah warns the heart not to be dazzled by wealth, fame, or status. It teaches that what appears flourishing may be hollow, and what appears small may be blessed. It exposes the lie that worldly success equals divine favor and replaces it with the truth that real success is maintaining humility, gratitude, and awareness of Allah. The believer who internalizes this message becomes harder to deceive, harder to manipulate, harder to tempt, because their heart is no longer attached to temporary illusions. The meeting of Musa A.S. and Khidr teaches yet another form of discernment, the wisdom to accept that Allah's decisions may appear confusing at first. Dajjal's deception thrives on the weakness of those who crumble when they cannot understand everything. Surah Al-Kahf trains the believer to trust the unseen guidance of Allah, to be patient when things do not make sense, and to hold on to truth even in uncertainty. This kind of spiritual maturity, a heart grounded in trust rather than explanations, becomes a barrier through which deceptive influences cannot pass. Dole, Karnine's story teaches protection, justice, and righteous leadership. It shows how power can be used ethical, how boundaries protect communities, and how leadership anchored in divine consciousness resists corruption. These lessons strengthen discernment, the ability to recognize sincere leadership from deceptive authority, genuine righteousness from artificial spirituality. In all of these narratives, Surah Al-Kahf builds a spiritual immunity. Its verses sharpen the believer's inner compass, helping them identify what aligns with Allah and what distances them from Him. It teaches that protection from Dajjal is not only about recognizing him when he comes, but about preparing the heart today. Purifying intentions, strengthening faith, seeking truth, questioning illusions, and cultivating a relationship with Allah that cannot be shaken by any trial. As you recite this surah every Friday, you are not simply reading words. You are reinforcing your spiritual shield, polishing your internal mirror, and training your heart to remain steady in a world that grows increasingly unstable. You are choosing clarity over confusion, truth over illusion, and faith over fear. And with every recitation, the light of Surah Al-Kahf continues to protect you, guide you, and prepare you for trials that only a heart illuminated by Allah can survive. Its stories remind us that every test carries hidden wisdom, and every delay carries divine timing. Surah Al-Kahf gently teaches the heart that life is not a series of random events, but a carefully woven thread of purpose, guided by the one who knows the beginning, the middle, and the end. In moments when we wonder why our prayers are delayed, why our hardships linger, or why the path ahead feels blocked, this surah becomes a reminder that Allah is not withholding goodness from us. He is preparing something greater, something more fitting, something perfectly aligned with what our souls truly need. The human heart often rushes toward instant, seeking immediate relief or instant clarity, but Surah Al-Kahf slows that urgency and brings us into a calmer, higher perspective. Allah's timing is never late, and His wisdom is never flawed. The people of the cave were young believers who fled for the sake of their faith. They were tested with loneliness, uncertainty, and fear, yet their story shows that the delay in their escape and the passage of centuries were not accidental. They were part of a divine plan meant to preserve their faith, protect them from oppression, and ultimately turn their story into a sign for generations to come. Their sleep, which would seem like a pause or delay in the eyes of humans, was actually the very thing that saved them. Through them, Allah shows us that sometimes what looks like a stagnant moment in life is actually a form of divine protection. Sometimes the pause is the miracle. Sometimes the delay is the rescue we do not yet recognize. The tale of the two gardens carries another layer of wisdom. One man was given abundance, beauty, and prosperity, while the other had far less. The one blessed with wealth fell into arrogance, believing that his garden would never perish. Yet Allah showed how quickly worldly blessings can disappear, and how swiftly illusions can crumble. The wisdom in this test lies not only in the loss of the garden, but in the reminder that material success is never the measure of divine approval. Sometimes Allah withholds certain worldly gifts from us not because we are unworthy, but because He knows that what looks like a blessing may eventually harm our faith. Sometimes He delays what we desperately want because the moment is not yet right. Sometimes He removes what we cling to so that we cling only to Him. Every delay hides mercy, and every test hides a lesson meant to reshape our hearts. The story of Musa with Keter is one of the clearest illustrations of hidden wisdom. Musa could not understand why Keter damaged a boat. killed a young boy, or repaired a wall in a hostile town. Each action seemed unjust or confusing. And this is exactly how life feels to us at times. Why did the job opportunity slip away? Why did a relationship end? Why did the prayer we cried for remain unanswered? But when the wisdom behind these actions was finally revealed, everything made sense. The boat was saved from a tyrant. The boy was replaced with one more righteous. The wall was repaired to protect an inheritance for orphans. In every test for orphans. The purpose was hidden until the appointed time. This story teaches that behind every disappointment, Allah is protecting us from something we cannot see. Behind every closed door, He is opening another we have not yet reached. Divine timing is not always the timing we want, but it is always the timing we need. Dhul Qarnayn's journey also reflects this truth. He traveled great distances, faced different communities, and encountered various challenges. Yet each step was guided by Allah's wisdom. He arrived at the right places at the right times, meeting people who needed him at exact moments when he was able to help. Nothing in his story feels rushed or delayed. It unfolds with perfect rhythm. This teaches the believer to trust Allah's orchestration of events, even when the path feels long or the destination feels out of reach. When we connect deeply with these stories, our hearts begin to soften. We learn to stop fighting the timing of our lives. We understand that Allah delays to elevate, withholds to purify, and tests to strengthen. We recognize that what feels like a setback may be the beginning of a breakthrough. We see that every hardship carries a meaning we may only understand years later, or perhaps only in the hereafter. Surah Al-Kahf teaches us to surrender the illusion of control and embrace the comfort of trust. It reminds us that Allah's wisdom is vast. His mercy is continuous, and His plan is always unfolding with precision, even when the pieces of our lives seem scattered. Every test is intended to shape us, not break us. Every delay is meant to prepare us, not punish us. And every moment, whether joyful or painful, is infused with divine purpose. Surah Al-Kahf whisperingly reassures the believer's heart tease, what you are waiting for is on its way. And what you are going through is not in vain. Allah is guiding your story more beautifully than you can imagine. Reading it every Friday reconnects the soul to Allah's protection, mercy, and guidance. This weekly act is not a ritual of the tongue, it is nourishment for the heart. In a world where spiritual exalts silently, where the demands of life pull us in every direction, Surah Al-Kahf becomes a place where the heart returns home. Each Friday, as the week's noise settles and the next week awaits, this surah stands like a gentle reminder from Allah that's come back to me. Slow down, reel in your soul. Remember who you are and who you belong to. The rhythm of reciting it every Jumu'ah creates a spiritual heartbeat that revives faith and steadies the believer, no matter what storms they face throughout the week. When a person sits with Surah Al-Kahf every Friday, something within them begins to shift. This surah is filled with themes of protection. Protection from trials, from deception, from arrogance, from confusion, and from spiritual blindness. Reciting it weekly is like renewing a divine shield. It wraps the heart in layers of clarity, reminding it of the fleeting nature of this world and the permanence of the hereafter. Each verse works like a soft polishing of the soul, wiping away the dust accumulated from worldly distractions. It pulls the believer out of the illusion that life is entirely in their control and gently redirects them to the reality that everything happens through Allah's mercy, wisdom, and plan. The moment you begin reciting it, your heart re-enters a space of remembrance. A space where Allah's words quiet the fears that have been growing inside you. Friday itself is blessed, a weekly Eid for the believer, and the recitation of this surah adds another layer of divine grace to that sacred day. It becomes a ritual of spiritual cleansing. Throughout the week, the soul may get weighed down by stress, by responsibilities, by mistakes, by distractions, but Friday offers a reset. Surah Al-Kahf acts like a spiritual sunrise, clearing the darkness of the past days and giving the heart a new light to carry into the next. The stories within Surah Al-Kahf offer guidance that is timely and timeless. By revisiting them weekly, their lessons settle deeper into the heart. The people of the cave remind you that Allah protects those who choose Him over the world. The man with the gardens reminds you to stay humble and grateful no matter what blessings you hold. Musa A.S. and Qaida remind you that divine wisdom is always operating behind the scenes. Dul Karnain reminds you to use strength with justice and compassion. Each of these stories carries guidance that the heart needs, not once, not occasionally, but regularly. Friday recitation ensures these truths stay alive in your life, shaping your character, your choices, and your understanding. There is something profoundly healing about the consistency of it. When you read Surah Al-Kahf every Friday, you are training your heart to return to Allah routinely, not only during hardship or joy, but as a regular act of love and commitment. This consistency builds a relationship with Allah that is steady and stable, the kind of relationship that brings peace even in turbulence. It is as though every Friday, Allah invites you to sit with Him, to listen, to reflect, to recharge. His words are the sanctuary your soul has been craving without always realizing it. And the protection this surah offers is not only from the physical or obvious trials. It is protection from internal storms, doubts that whisper, fears that overwhelm, temptations that distract, and despair that creeps in quietly. Reading Surah Al-Kahf reconnects you to Allah's mercy, reminding you that even when you falter, His forgiveness is vast, even when you feel lost, His guidance is near, and even when the world feels heavy, His protection is stronger than anything you fear. The weekly recitation is also a reminder that Allah's guidance is not something you receive once and carry forever. It is something you nurture. The heart needs constant reminders, constant nourishment, and constant reconnection. Surah Al-Kahf becomes a form of spiritual maintenance, a renewal of faith, a reaffirmation of trust, and a revival of hope. It is a weekly opportunity to step back from worldly pressures and step into divine clarity. As your week ends again, reciting Surah Al-Kahf becomes an anchor that grounds your soul. It whispers to you that you are not alone, that Allah is watching over you, guiding you, and surrounding you with mercy far greater than your worries. Each Friday, this surah opens a window of light, a light that follows you through the days, through your decisions, and through the life you are walking toward. Reading it weekly is not just a practice, it is a lifeline. It reconnects you to Allah's protection, envelopes you in His mercy, and guides you with His wisdom, ensuring your heart stays illuminated no matter how dark the world becomes. The surah teaches reliance on Allah over worldly power, wealth, or appearances. In a world that constantly measures worth by what we own, how we look, or what position we hold, Surah Al-Kahf becomes a reminder that true strength does not come from the things people chase. It comes from the one who created everything people chase. This surah gently pulls the heart away from illusions that exhaust the soul and redirects it toward the source of peace, security, and fulfillment. It teaches that the things we often consider important, money, status, influence, are temporary accessories of life, not anchors of identity. What truly sustains the believer is not what rests in their hands, but what rests in their heart trust in Allah. The story of the man with the 2 gardens is a powerful example of this truth. One man had everything: lush gardens, flowing rivers, abundance, comfort, and admiration. The other had little. Yet the one who possessed everything became arrogant, believing that his blessings were permanent, that his success was self-made, and that his future was guaranteed. Surah Al-Kahf exposes how easily human beings can be deceived by outward beauty and material abundance. The wealthy man's mistake was not having wealth. It was attaching his sense of worth to it. He forgot the giver and became attached to the gift. But when Allah willed, the garden that looked unshakable turned to nothing in a moment. Through this, Allah teaches us, anything that is built on dunya alone can collapse, but what is built on faith remains unshaken. This surah shows that relying on worldly things is like leaning on a wall made of sand. It may look strong, but it cannot support the weight of the heart. Wealth can disappear, beauty fades, power shifts, and people change. If our sense of security depends on these things, our hearts will break every time life shifts. But when reliance is placed on Allah, the heart becomes stable, content, and unbreakable. When Allah becomes the one you trust, losing things in life no longer feels like the end. It becomes a transition, a redirection, or a purification. Surah Al-Kahf teaches that true richness lies in contentment and true power lies in surrender to the divine. The story of Musa, As, and Khidr also reflects this beautifully. Musa was a prophet, respected, knowledgeable, and honored. Yet even he was reminded that human knowledge, no matter how vast, is still incomplete compared to Allah's infinite wisdom. This humbling journey teaches that relying on personal capability, intelligence, or status can lead to arrogance, but relying on Allah leads to humility and growth. When things happen in ways that confuse us or contradict our plans, Surah Al-Kahf reminds us that the plan of Allah is better than the expectations of people. This is reliance not on what we think should happen, but on the one who knows what must happen. Then there is the story of Dhul Qarnayn, a leader with immense power and resources. But unlike the man with the gardens, he used his strength not for arrogance, but for service. He recognized that his abilities were a trust from Allah, not a symbol of superiority. His humility, despite his power, teaches that relying on Allah is what elevates a person, not the blessings themselves. The surah highlights that true leadership is not about domination. It is about compassion, justice, and recognizing that every blessing is a responsibility. Surah Al-Kahf repeatedly shifts the believer's gaze from the external world to the internal heart. It teaches that real success is not measured by what people see, it is measured by the state of your soul. A person may appear poor in the eyes of people, but be rich in the sight of Allah. Another may appear powerful in dunya, but be weak in faith. This surah realigns the heart with the truth that the world values what fades, but Allah values what remains. Every time we recite this surah, we are reminded to loosen our grip on dunya and tighten our grip on Allah. We are reminded that the heart was never created to attach itself to fragile things. We are reminded that relying on appearances creates insecurity, relying on wealth creates fear, and relying on people creates disappointment. But relying on Allah creates peace. This surah becomes a quiet voice within the believer's soul saying the text, do not chase what will not last. Do not measure yourself by temporary things. Do not let your heart bow down to what can be taken away. What matters is your reliance on the one who never changes, never leaves, and never stops providing for you through its stories and wisdom. Surah Al-Kahf transforms the believer's perspective. It teaches us to walk through this world with open hands, but a heart anchored firmly in Allah, because that is where true strength, true freedom, and true success reside. It renews spiritual focus weekly, grounding the believer in purpose, patience, and trust. In a life filled with constant change, noise, and pressure, the heart can easily lose direction. We find ourselves pulled by distractions, overwhelmed by responsibilities, and drained by emotions we don't always know how to process. By the time Friday arrives, the soul is tired, quietly longing for a moment to breathe, to reset, to reconnect. Reciting Surah Al-Kahf becomes that weekly turning point. It's a moment where the heart pauses and realigns itself with what truly matters. It is like stepping out of the turbulence of dunya and stepping into a calm sanctuary built from divine words. With each recitation, The heart remembers Azir. You were created for a higher purpose, sustained by a deeper patience, and guided by a trust that anchors your soul. A Surah Al-Kahf does not just fill the mind with stories, it reshapes the inner landscape of the believer. Every week, as you revisit its verses, something inside you strengthens. A sense of clarity, a feeling of groundedness, a deeper awareness of your journey. The stories whisper reminders that serve as anchors throughout the week, that struggles are temporary, that faith requires courage, that patience is not passive but powerful, and that trusting Allah brings a peace the world can never give. These reminders settle into the heart, shaping how the believer responds to challenges, how they interpret delays, and how they navigate the ups and downs of life. The people of the cave renew the believer's sense of purpose. Their courage to protect their faith teaches us that no matter how confused or pressured we feel, our ultimate purpose is to seek Allah's pleasure. Each Friday, this story replenishes that sense of direction, reminding the heart to hold onto values even when the world pushes in the opposite direction. The believer is reminded that purpose is not found in the world's approval, but in the sincerity of one's connection. The story of the man with the gardens renews patience. It teaches that blessings come and go, that the rise and fall of worldly gifts is part of life. Each Friday, this narrative softens the heart against envy, against comparison, against disappointment. It reminds the believer that patience is not simply waiting. It is trusting that Allah knows what to give, when to give, and when to take. This weekly reminder strengthens resilience, teaching the soul to respond to loss with grace, to challenges with maturity and to blessings with gratitude. By renewing patience, the surah gives the believer emotional strength for the week ahead. The journey of Musa AAS with Qaida renews trust. It reminds the believer that not everything will make sense, that unseen wisdom is always unfolding, and that Allah's plan is more precise than any expectation we hold. Reading this story helps the heart release its grip on worry. It teaches the soul to trust that Allah sees what we cannot, hears what we do not, and knows what we never will. This weekly reconnection to trust is like watering the roots of faith, keeping them alive, strong, and deeply grounded. The story of Dhul Qarnayn renews intention. It reminds the believer to act with justice, to serve with humility, and to use whatever Allah has given for good. Each Friday, this story realigns the believer with the purpose of righteous action. It softens the hardness that dunya can create. It reminds the soul that true success is not measured by power or achievement, but by how deeply one's heart remains connected to Allah while walking through worldly responsibilities. Week after week, these lessons seep into the believer's heart, creating an internal stability that dunya cannot shake. Reciting Surah Al-Kahf becomes a weekly spiritual check-in, a moment to reflect, to repent, to breathe, and to begin again with a clearer heart. It is like polishing the soul from the rust of the past week, allowing it to shine again with sincerity and faith. The weekly recitation keeps the heart alive, alert, and aware, preventing it from being swallowed by routine, by strew, or by the subtle erosion of spiritual forgetfulness. The believer begins to notice that with each Friday recitation, their reactions change. Worries feel lighter, challenges feel purposeful, delays feel meaningful, and hardships feel bearable. This is the power of weekly renewal. It builds spiritual endurance. It teaches the heart to rise again and again, even after difficult days. It deepens the believer's sense of belonging to Allah, grounding them in a trust that is not fragile but firm, not momentary but continuous. Surah Al-Kahf becomes the quiet transformation that shapes the believer from within. Every Friday, it brings the heart back to its center, back to Allah, back to purpose, back to patience, back to trust. It resets the spiritual compass, ensuring the believer continues their journey with clarity, stability, and a renewed sense of connection to the one who guides every step.